Hello, everyone. With the launch of the book of Roto next week, the first chapter, I've decided to launch a group of polls to discuss the most divisive topics on the Roto community. The results were very interesting, and I'm here today to discuss them. I'm Carlos Conceição, and this is RTC Roto Labs. Hello, hello, welcome back. Um, what makes some of these topics being so divisive in the Roto community? Uh, this is very simple. Majority of the people usually tell me that they have a preference. Oh, I do something this way because this is my personal preference. Well, I do believe that people's personal preferences uh, don't have a measurement in regards to efficiency and quality. It's just a preference. So, for you to decide to do something when you are accountable for how much it costs, you should also be able to justify why you do that if there is multiple options on the table. And to be able to do that, that is one of the reasons that I've decided to do this course, is to finally lay down all the options that people have to do things, compare them, and come out with a conclusion. And that was the reason why I've created these LinkedIn polls. Let's have a quick look at some of the results. So, one of the polls, a classic topic regarding which splines do you use. 66% use B splines and 20% Bayesiers. Being the X spline a variant of the B spline created by Boris Effects Silhouette. But this is still very interesting. Majority of people using B spline. I'll leave this topic, the discussion of this, because each one of these topics can have its own episode. I definitely want to focus on the bigger one today. Second one of these questions was how is your strategy for keyframing? And majority of the people said animation key poses, 68%. They use the animation key poses to keyframe the objects. Being 11% using first, lasts, and halves, and then 14% using first, and then every other 5 or 10 or 15, just a fixed amount of frames that people use to spread their keyframes throughout. Very interesting. Animation being also my favorite. We will discuss this topic in a different episode. The most important one that I wanted to discuss today, and the next two polls, literally discuss the same thing in a different way. So the first poll was, how do you match perfectly the plate's motion blur? And you have 62% of people saying, let the software interpolate that motion blur. Turn on the motion blur and let the software do the rest. Still, 13% using hard edges plus pull feather. Very interesting. And 23%, one every four, uses hard edge and says, well, let comp handle the motion blur. Let them add the motion blur to it. There's not necessarily a reason or an explanation on how could this be achieved, but apart from one, that's the one that we're going to be discussing tonight. But still, if you combine these two, 23% plus another 13, there's a lot of people using hard edge. So the last topic that I've launched, last poll that I've launched was, where do you put your splines? Which is directly connected with the previous one, of course. And 67% using the middle. What is this middle? Well, if you consider the motion blur having a hard edge and a soft edge, the middle, it's literally between those two edges. That's where you would position your spline. I've created a little explanation here that probably makes it easier for people to understand. So that's your hard edge, that's your soft edge, and this is the middle. And the majority of people said middle, but there's still one every four that uses hard edge. And there is definitely a very interesting opinion by Xavier Bourque. I hope I'm saying this name correctly. Pardon me if I didn't. That he proposed a solution, which is, let's use the tools. One of his pixel fudger tools, which is the vector blur, vector edge blur, something like that. So I would like to discuss today, how can we measure this efficiency, and actually lay down those metrics, okay? And use this example and one of the solutions that was proposed to kind of have an example in there. So first one of the two metrics should be speed of execution. How efficient is one technique over the other? And for that, I have here a very simple example that I want to discuss with you. What we have here on the first line is a very simple ball moving up and down, and this is an echo of that movement. That means that if this is 25 frames that are represented here, this is if I overlap each one of those frames over the previous one, you'll have a plot of the whole movement. It's just easier for me to then just showing you a video and or a sequence of frames that can have all of this information. I want that to be visible all in one. So classic 180-degree shutter, global shutter, and 24 frames per second. You see that the classic cinematic motion blur happening here. So option number one, splines on the hard edge. This is what 1/4 of the people are choosing. And this is definitely what maybe 1/4 or 1/3 of the companies in the world are also choosing as their standard. Let's have a look at how efficient this is. So when you lay the splines on the hard edge, if you analyze here in each one of these frames, where is the hard edge? You will soon realize that the hard edge changes every single frame. This is due to the movement of the object, which is accelerated and decelerated. There is not a possibility of having the object stopped and then always at constant speed, right? This is just natural flow of movement, has acceleration and decelerations. And that hard edge will naturally move. You know, it will change every single frame. Look at that. It's like sometimes the object is going faster, sometimes the object is going slower. I've tried to represent here different movements, constant speeds, fast accelerations. So you see different types of hard edges that can be generated. And you'll see clearly here, there's the problem. I usually ask this question. So if you put the splines on the hard edge, what happens if the object is so fast that there is no hard edge? People usually tell me, it's like, then I'm going to have to fake it. I'm going to have to create another spline. I'm going to have to paint the edges. I'm going to have to do something in there, which worries me a lot, you know? So you have a standard, but you don't follow that standard when it fails. Interesting. So what we have here, and we end up with 25 keyframes just to represent this movement that I've created here. Every single frame has to be keyframed, and you have to go physically change the shape of that object to match that hard edge. Can you see how time consuming this is? It's not that you can jump a few frames here and there unless the object is stopped, which I'm not considering here. You know, stopped objects don't have motion blur, so it's not much to discuss in there. I'm discussing when there is motion blur. You're going to have to change it every single frame because it changes. The amount changes. So the hard edge has to come inside or outside. Cool? You see how time consuming this is. Now, if you use the other way, which is splines in the middle, what happens is very simple. What is the shape of your object? Well, if this is a ball, the ball is round. So what I consider normal roto, I haven't learned any other way of doing this, to be honest, until today. You just keep the shape of your object. It's round. So imagine that you are trying to capture this with a camera, and your shutter is infinitely fast, almost like a sports action photography, where you have that super fast shutter that freezes the movement of the object or the person that you are trying to capture. That's exactly what you would do here. Where do you put your splines? Well, the splines would be exactly, if you freeze the movement and there was no motion blur, the object would have that shape, and the spline is going to be in the middle. Very simple, right? That's how cameras work. Shutter is centered. So for this specific example here, what we have is, to represent this, 6 keyframes. With 6 keyframes, you would have the whole job done for this example. There is nothing more, nothing less needed. People say like, oh, but then like when I'm laying down the keyframes, if I put the first keyframe, the motion blur is not going to match. For instance, look at this first keyframe, first frame here. The object already has motion blur. Of course, because with this method, you need context. You need context before and after the one that you are judging. So in this case, and this is always something that we recommend to people, always create a frame before the first and a frame after the last. So you can actually move your objects, guess the position of the object. Since you don't have photography, you would have to guess. Not very difficult, right? Few pixels to the side, and that will do the trick. And then your motion blur on the first frame will be correct. Okay? This is valid for every single frame. If I'm looking at the frame in the middle, how do I justify if that keyframe is good or not? Well, if you have the context, either side of that keyframe, it has to be keyframed. So in this case, this position here and that position there will give the perfect motion blur for the frame in the middle, and all the other ones as well. Okay, so it's very simple. It needs context. It's not like you are positioning the splines where you see things like the hard edge. You should see the hard edge is very obvious. Just adapt the splines to be on that edge. In this case, it's not. In this case, you are keeping the shape of your object. If you have a hand moving, the hand should have all the fingers, unless the hand is changing, right? So this is very simple. It's like with so much less work, I ended up having the same result. Okay? So in terms of execution, speed of execution, efficiency, the second option, which is splines in the middle, will be significantly faster. How much? 50%? 60? 70%? It's going to be a lot more. You know, for me to do 6 keyframes compared to 25 keyframes, it's a gain in speed. And this is directly affected. You multiply this for, I don't know, shots with 300 frames, 150 frames, 500 frames, and then you multiply these by 300 shots, 500 shots, 1,000 shots, and you see how many days you have saved. You've saved thousands of dollars for a full show, okay? So you cannot just take this lightly and say, this is my preference. Your preference has costs. Unless it's you as a freelancer to decide how much is your budget and how long you will take to do things, fair enough. But if you are not, if you are in a high performance team, you need to be careful, you know, and you have to be mindful of the choices that are being taken around you. So that's why the first metric for me, it's so important. But there is a second one, which a lot of people tell me is like, Carlos, but that is very true. But we are in the business of finaling shots, not the business of creating mats. I agree. So this is why the quality of the final product, the quality of that mat, has to be what comp needs, and has to be what validates comp to finish the shot faster and to the highest quality and the highest precision, the one that gets closer to the photography that was captured. Okay, to do that, I have another example that I want to show you. I brought here a little example with a ping pong ball that I've done a few years ago for my courses. If you've been through some of my training, you probably have seen this footage before. I've done several passes with different speeds, different camera settings, different motions, different defocus. So there's a lot of information that we can discuss just with a simple ping pong ball, right? But this is also very simplistic. So people can say, "Oh, I could luma key this." Sure, you can luma key, but you couldn't luma key the bottom of it. You would have to choose some kind of color. But that's not the objective here. The objective here is what happens if my motion blur, you can see through that and you can see through something that is on the background, okay? So that motion blur is contaminated. So to represent that, I've forced it even more. So I just painted some strokes on the motion blur. So the objective here is, how do I get rid of this contamination on the motion blur and still be able to comp this ball perfectly in any kind of background, okay? So let's look at my option. The only one that I know, to be honest. Very simple. You lay down your roto. Your roto is a perfect round ball. This is your spline. And your spline lays in the middle, right? Halfway through the hard edge and the soft edge. And what you're going to do, you're going to animate the previous one. You're going to keyframe the previous frame. And you're going to do that for the frame after. So I'm on frame 19, I've animated 20, and I've animated 18, okay? So how does this look? If I turn on the motion blur on this spline, the alpha should look like that. The only thing that I've done here is I've changed the motion blur samples from 1. You could see some banding. I've changed it to 2. By the way, I'm doing this in Nuke just for reference. I don't do roto in Nuke unless it's something simple, some garbage roto that I want to do, some kind of blending shapes that I want for mixing stuff loosely. I would always do any piece of roto in Boris Effect Silhouette. So that is the topic for a different episode. Okay. So what do I do now? Well, people say, Carlos, but I need a hard edge version of this mat because now I need to extrude those edges to get rid of that contamination. So your splines in the middle don't give me the hard edge. That's wrong. You get the hard edge for free. If you use a gamma node, you're going to gamma down all of that information. Look at this. This is the original roto. 0.5, you just gamma down that to anything that removes you all the transparent pixels, and you have your hard edge version. Okay, let's look at the original roto and let's compare with the ping pong ball. Look at this, perfect. It's matching 1-to-1. Matching 1-to-1. If I look at the gamma down version and I compare it with the ball, look, where is the hard edge? It's here. Boom. Where's the hard edge? It's there. Boom. The hard edge matches perfectly. Look all around. Your hard edge is matching perfectly. You get this version for free. So you don't need to put the splines on the hard edge. Cool? So with this done, if I have my hard edge version, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this alpha into my plate, my painted plate, and I'm going to pre-mult. Very simple. Contamination is gone, right? From here onwards, you can use any edge extrude, edge dilate tool, anything that you prefer. I'm using the edge dilate done by my good friend Nico Coronado. Shout out to him because he's created this tool is really old. It probably has amazing new version of this. But this has different methods for you to edge extrude. Brilliant. So what I like to do is I like to extrude those edges very slightly, little piece at a time. This is why I've multiplied these things. So I just adjust the first one, and then I just add a bit more, and a bit more, and a bit more. Okay, Cool. So I have my extruded edge. Now what do I do? Well, now is where I need the motion blur. So if you don't have the original motion blur, you're gone. Okay? How do you get your soft edges? You're gone. You don't have it. So what do? I'm going to use the original Roto again, the soft Roto with the perfect motion blur matching to the photography, and I'm going to copy it to my extruded edges, and I'm going to pre-mold that. Boom, done. And with this, let's compare this with the plate. Look at that. 1-to-1. Absolute perfection. Cool. And the see-through background is gone. The contamination is gone. So I could use this, and I could put this on any kind of background now, and there wouldn't be a problem. But let's take this a bit further, because like the other thing that I see here is like there's missing some grain. Okay, let's get quick and dirty F regrain in here in the mix. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna regrain the whole thing. Okay, I just chose like something in the middle to give me the grain here. Of course, this creates double grain. I just want to regrain the bit that I'm adding on the outside, the soft area. So to do that, I'm inverting the mat. Okay, so this was my gamma down. I'm inverting the mat, and I'm gonna be copy, pre-molding. So my F regrain is only being applied to the soft edges. Cool. So now look at this. Combine this version that didn't have the grain with that version. You merge it over, and you get a nice grain throughout, just for cosmetics, okay? For now. And with this, I conclude that this is almost perfect. And I'm not even like looking at pixel perfection, you know? I'm just like, I loosely did this example just for you to see how quickly it is, you know? Just a round shape, boom, done. Now, I'm going to go back to Xavier Bourque's option of using his PXF vector edge blur. And he told me, he's like, look, what I do is I do a hard edge version of the Roto, and then I use my vector edge blur tool to get rid of the background, which I've explained on LinkedIn that it creates some problems. It creates some massive problems. So let's have a look at this solution. And again, this is just an example. This is not to pick on him. This is just to have an example here that solves the problem of the hard edge mat. Okay, you've already seen that with the hard edge mat, you don't have the soft version to promote it again. Okay, but let's see if with the hard edge version, there will be some kind of other method that could be done to apply that motion blur in comp. Okay, so let's have a look. This version of Roto is going to have the spline on the hard edge. I've done the same thing, frame before, frame after, and I'm using the same contaminated motion blur to simulate that my background has something that is see-through. Okay, here is not really see-through, it's on top of it, which is even worse. Okay, so there's no way to hide. That has to go. So hard edge version of the mat, I copy it into my plate, pre-mold. Okay, here we are exactly on the same stage that I was before. Okay, so now what Xavier says is apply the vector edge blur. And I'm applying the vector edge blur with no other crazy settings. It's just the shutter should be 0.5, which is matching the camera. Okay, if I do more or less, it's going to be the same problem because the hard edge is going to go inside and the soft edge is going to go outside. And that is, in reality, the biggest problem that we are facing right now. Because look at this. This version is losing definitely the soft edge and the hard edge, the original ones. Look at this. My hard edge is here. When I apply the tool, my hard edge is coming inside. Look at where the original soft edge is. And when I apply the tool, the soft edge goes over here. Of course it is, because he is trying. If you apply this tool to the splines in the middle, you would probably get something a bit better. Of course, you would have something here in the background that you have to figure out how to do it. But definitely with a version on the hard edge, you are literally destroying that hard edge, the original hard edge. It's gone. So there's nothing you can do to bring this back. But let me add some of the grain as well, just for us, for out of cosmetic looks, for this to look the same. Okay. So what I'm going to do again, I'm going to regrain all of it, and I'm gonna be having to use some kind of mat to extract that soft edge. Now, what is the problem? Is that I don't have the possibility of extracting, of knowing where is that soft edge, because my mat was hard edge. Okay, so I need to use the mat that is created, the softness that is created by the vector edge blur. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to see what happens if I copy this and I pre-mult. Okay, I'm going to merge it over the original, and you have here your. Let me just remove this. Regrain. Copy. Yes, from there. Okay. Oh, I'm going to have to invert. Yeah. There he goes. Boom. Okay. Problems here. Let me see. Inverted mat. Copy it into here. Remote. Merge it over the top. Is this regrain working? Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So again, there is missing information here. All right. Why is that? Well, because my mat was hard edge. So you are only applying the grain over the last piece of the outside of that hard edge. So what I'm going to have to do, I'm going to have to gamma down that original version. I'm going to have to gamma down to get the whole softness. Okay, I'm going to have to gamma it down, and then invert it. Okay, and then apply our cut and put it back on top. But there's still not enough, because there is a soft edge, and the soft edge, we always know that gets a ring of grain around. So I'm going to have to dilate it a little bit. You know, I'm going to have to dilate a little bit to get rid of that piece of grain. Fair enough. You know, it's a problem with every soft edge patch. And this is the final result. You know, cosmetically, it looks good. This is what he was saying. Like, it looks good. It always works. But what are the consequences? Well, let's have a look. Ooh, we lost a lot of information. We lost information on the outside. We lost information on the inside. Look at the amount of hard edge that was lost. You know, it was half of it. Half was lost on the out, half was lost on the in. So if I compare this version with the original, and I compare the version that I've done with the original, which one would you prefer? You know, this is the splines in the middle, and this is the splines in the end. Very simple, right? So which one would comp choose? Which one would get those tech check notes approved? People can say, oh, but I usually get my shots approved. It was like, well, that's the burden on the compositing supervisor. If he likes, and if he agrees, and even if the client agrees on losing all of that detail on your object whenever you are comping it, sure, good for you. But we're talking about perfection, and I was fortunate enough to learn and to grow in my career with people that would not allow this to pass. You know, if the photography has good pixels, good solid pixels, you have to keep them. You have to keep them all. Okay. So here's the explanation. You know, like this is quite simple. There's two metrics that we've seen today. We've seen the speed of execution. Splines in the middle keeps a simple shape that you carry throughout You only have to animate the key poses and you get the shot done. Careful, of course, with the context surrounding keyframes will dictate how your current keyframe will look. Splines in a hard edge will take twice as long to do because every single frame you are having to adapt to that speed and the amount of motion blur that sometimes disappear. And when it disappears, you have no option, absolute no option. You have to paint it by hand. You have to recreate somehow a fake motion blur out of a spline. You have to transform that motion blur, give it a direction on that softness to kind of fake this. Why? You can get all of that for free. Cool. Second metric, the one we've seen, quality and precision. This is what we're providing to comp. We're providing the best possible mat to achieve perfection and to get it tech check approved. The shot is not done just because you believe that this is the best version that you can get. If you give the option of having something better, why wouldn't you do that? Very simple for me. Okay? So, all of these topics are going to be discussed in so much detail in the book of Roto. The little course that I'm going to be launching, and hopefully the last time that I'm going to have to teach Roto. Every single topic that is divisive, that is controversial, is going to be discussed. And what is the reason? Just to give information to people. Why not to share all of this information so everyone knows how to handle these situations? And I'm not even talking about the exceptions and the little nuances that you will find in each one of these things. Okay, there's a lot more interesting information, a lot more engineering to discuss and go deeper than this. This is like, from me, the base level. Okay, so if there is other options out there that people can say, Carlos, I know how to apply a motion blur with a hard edge version that matches the photography. Bring it on, please. Bring it on. Because I haven't seen any. I only see excuses. It's like the workflow works like that. My preference works like that. It's just not possible, you know. It's like you have to bring something better to the table, and and that is laying out reasons. Okay, there is a lot of science behind compositing, behind photography, and as I mentioned in the beginning, your preference is not a measurement of efficiency, of quality, and productivity. So think about that and drop some comments. Okay? Have fun, and I'll see you next week.